Hi, and welcome to Conversations with B'nai B'rith International. I'm CEO Dan Mariaschin. Thanks for spending some time with us today. If you enjoy our conversations, make sure you never miss a program by subscribing to the B'nai B'rith YouTube channel and liking us on Facebook. And be sure to visit our website, bnaibrith.org, to learn more about our work across the globe. Well, B'nai B'rith just published its Winter 2021 magazine, and here to break down the issue are editor Eugene Meyer and cover story writer Dina Kraft. They're here to talk about what went into Kraft's in-depth look at today's golden age of television in Israel, how an artist is paying tribute to the unique World War II rescue mission that saved his father and grandmother, and so much more. Eugene Meyer is an award-winning journalist who spent more than 3 decades at the Washington Post as a reporter and editor. He has more than 50 bylines in the New York Times and has, among many highlights, interviewed the Beatles before one of their final live performances, as well as former U.S. Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall. And since 2009, Meyer has been the editor of B'nai B'rith magazine, which has won several awards under his stewardship. Dina Kraft is a journalist based in Tel Aviv. She writes for the Christian Science Monitor and the Los Angeles Times, where she reports on Israeli and Palestinian politics, culture, and society. She hosts a pair of podcasts and is a longtime foreign correspondent who has reported from South Africa, Tunisia, Russia, and more. In 2020, Kraft won the B'nai B'rith World Center Jerusalem Award for journalism, recognizing excellence in diaspora reportage. Gene, Dina, thank you for joining us. Great to have both of you here.
Good to be here.
Thank you for having us.
Well, Gene, the first one is for you. B'nai B'rith magazine is the longest continuously published magazine in the Jewish world. Help us understand your role with B'nai B'rith magazine as editor, and how did you become editor, and how has your role evolved over time?
Well, I became editor. It's been about 12 years when the position was vacated, and Harvey Burke, who was the vice president for communications, was a friend and somebody I'd known for a long time, and asked me if I would step in. I was happy to do so. And so December of 2009, I think, is when I began. And the first issue appeared under my editorship in 2010. And my role is really to assign stories, to come up with ideas, to solicit ideas from writers, to reach out to many of the people that I've known in my newspaper and journalistic career. And I've been very fortunate to have quite a distinguished group of writers who've done stories for us over the years and continue to do so, including Dina. And so from conception through publication, it's a long road, but it's not that rocky road, and it's been a very satisfying journey.
Well, we're going to talk about Dina's cover story in a moment, but tell us about the process that goes into choosing a cover story. I envision, I think I know how it's done at B'nai B'rith, but I've always envisioned a group of 20 people sitting around a long table, kind of arguing back and forth about what constitutes a cover story. So tell us how that process takes place and what the thinking was in terms of Dina's story.
Well, it's not 20 or 30 people, it's maybe 3 or 4 people in our case. And a couple of considerations. We want a story that would have broad appeal to our readers and to the audience online as well, and something that also has a visual element to it. You could argue that we pick a story for the cover that looks good on the cover, but really I'm more interested in the content and having a wide appeal. In the case of Israeli TV, it seemed like a no-brainer. This is a story that's been developing over the last few years, and we're not the first publication to write about it, but I hope that we could take a fresh look. And there are new shows being created and streaming all the time, and it's really been quite an extraordinary output out of such a small country, and in ways that's sort of dominating the world of streaming, which has become a major way that people entertain themselves, particularly during the pandemic. So particularly with this sort of lockdown period we're in, the streaming is more and more on our minds and on our screens. So that seemed like the natural cover. Plus, we had a choice of 3 or 4 different covers that on the same topic that our designer Simeon Montesa came up with, and so we kind of took a straw poll, and then we narrowed it down to a couple, and we came up with the final product.
So one more magazine-related question or editing-related question before we turn to Dina. What are some of the biggest challenges in developing each magazine issue? Now, we're living in the age of the internet. Everything is instantaneous. We've got Twitter. Magazines have adapted to this, and I'm curious about your thinking about how that works, where with the internet, it's here now, it's gone in 15 seconds. A magazine is going to be on somebody's coffee table. You pick it up, you read it when you have time and you have presence of mind to really enjoy what's in the magazine. Tell us what your thinking is about how magazines have adapted to the age in which we live.
Well, I'll speak specifically about our magazine, and that's a great question. Obviously, we don't do breaking news. We publish once a year, but we also try not to do what we call evergreens, a story that you might have read 10 years ago, and it's just repurposed. We try to be relevant, but we can't be, we can't be timeless. We want to be timeless, and we can't be as timely as if we were a daily or even a monthly publication. But we try to present an eclectic mix of stories that would have a broad appeal to different groups of readers. And we cover stories, and our cover stories in particular, I think are relevant, on point. We've done covers on subjects ranging from Jews of color to intermarriage to Israeli TV, you name it. I think our magazine has a long shelf life because of that. They're not expendable. They're not ephemeral, and I think that they're keepers.
Dina, this question, thanks, Gene. This question is for you. Israeli TV shows have found worldwide audiences, so much so that we might be in the middle of Israel's television golden age, as you write about. How did your cover story develop, and when did you know, hey, the remarkable production and cinematic success emerging from Israel is my story?
So Israeli television has been sort of a topic for a while. Already over a decade ago, there were shows like In Treatment, which now is having a revival on HBO, a new version of it. There's Homeland. These are Israeli shows that were adapted for an American audience. What's new and what's sort of been impossible to ignore, especially in the age, as Gene mentioned, of streaming mixed with COVID lockdown, is everybody in front of their television being able to consume Israeli content in its original form. So they're watching Shtisel, the story I know you were a fan of, and many are a fan of, right? Yeah, a story of a ultra-Orthodox, a Haredi family living in Jerusalem that gives you sort of a inside view into their lives. In some ways, it's like a telenovela, but they're wearing black cloaks and wigs, and they're very relatable, right, as people. But here we are around the world. People are watching the show in a mix of Yiddish and Hebrew, which is what the show is performed in. And you have shows. You have Fauda is another example, and there are so many of these examples of TV shows that are now being picked up by streaming services, whether it's Apple Plus TV, a show called Losing Alice, which actually goes off script a little bit. What we've seen a lot of from Israel are stories that have war or conflict or the Mossad somehow in the backdrop. But what we're beginning to see is stories of other sort of either everyday Israeli life or more universal themes also coming to the fore. So, I mean, I was, aware of this phenomenon and a fan of shows like Shtisel myself. And Gina and I had a conversation of what can we do to sort of, bring this forward to the B'nai B'rith audience, and kind of give people a ride to the landscape, right, of what's going on and why it's happening. And what's interesting is, even though Israeli TV has been developing now for a while, the original sort of secret sauce is the same as it was over a decade ago when you had breakthrough hits like In Treatment and Homeland, which is really, really good scripts. There isn't a lot of money for the bang bang. There isn't a lot of money for special effects and show. Some of the best Israeli television are the quieter shows like In Treatment or like Shtisel, that are very, very low, relatively low budgets, but have very, very richly written scripts. And usually often it's the director, the director is the same as the script writers as well, in part because of budgets.
It's really so gratifying to see this. As you say, over the last 10 years, my wife is Israeli, and she grew up in the very early days of television in Israel. And their idea of an entertaining evening was to try to pull in either Jordanian or Egyptian TV to see Gunsmoke or The Virginian or some other program. The news was really basically the core of Israeli television. It was local, it was domestic, and of course the news, very important for Israelis. But now to see that there is this global interest in the product coming out of Israel is really quite something. So until now, the broad popularity of Israeli television series seems to have hinged on two critical qualities. The first is the use of nuanced storytelling without the addition of bells and whistles. Storytelling being very much a part of our history, our culture, without the bells and whistles that Hollywood tends to use, as you said, like special effects and international superstars. The second quality is the realistic nature of the stories that the shows tell, with personal, cultural, romantic, and geopolitical conflicts that people can relate to. Intricate, meaningful stories are really a hallmark of Judaism and Jewish history. How much do you think the combination of good writing and reliable storytelling comes from that tradition? Or perhaps it's that Israelis need to contend with the cultural and religious differences that exist in the country and the daily threat of the violence they face, and therefore they produce material that relates to that. How do you break that down?
Yeah, I think it's hard to break it down exactly, but I think that there definitely is a storytelling culture. We are the people of the book, we're the people of the Bible, we are formed from narrative and story, right? Like all people are. But Jews, have this rich tradition of storytelling and midrashim and whatnot. But there is a lot to process here, right? There's a lot of conflict. There's a lot of dealing with mortality and violence and premature loss of life and tragedy and the Holocaust. There's a lot of trauma, right? And there's a lot of conflict. And I remember when I was reporting in South Africa, there was some would say like apartheid is the author, or in his case, like conflict is the author. There's just a lot to digest and bring forth. So I think part of what makes Israeli storytelling so powerful is that in a lot of the stories are very intimate and very personal, and people are writing from their own experience. The Shtisel writers are a perfect example of that. One came from a Haredi background, two writers, one came from a ultra-Orthodox background, one came from a more modern Orthodox background. So they were writing, as I interviewed one of them, described like a love letter to the community that he left, to the Orthodox community. And one of his great joys that this pair of writers share great joy is that who's watching this aside from people around the world? Ultra-Orthodox who are not supposed to be watching television, but are, having hacked, downloaded versions they're watching, pirated versions they're watching on their phones, which they feel like is the highest compliment. But there's a lot of, there's a lot of history to tap here. There's a lot of personal trauma to tap here. So for example, there's an HBO picked up an Israeli series about the Yom Kippur War and about the trauma of young soldiers, going through the Yom Kippur War. And then more recently, there was another HBO piece was called Our Boys. And this was an interesting case because you had three writers come together, two Jewish Israeli and one Palestinian Israeli. And they were recounting sort of based on the based on true story of the 2014, the summer that ignited the 2014 Israel-Gaza war. And it was interesting, I think, for Jewish Israelis, especially to watch this, because it was shown from the perspective of Palestinian family victims and from the Jewish side as well. And it caused some controversy. Netanyahu, who at the time was prime minister, he called on it to be banned and taken, and for the television station here to be boycotted. But what's interesting is that what's happening in Israeli television is not so dissimilar to what's happening in Israeli film, which, of course, as you know, also has been blossoming in recent decades. And it very much holds a mirror to society, I think, for good and for bad, what's happening internally. So yeah, there's a lot of stories to be told and a lot of creativity. And I interviewed an American Israeli who is the director and writer of Losing Alice, which was on Apple Plus TV, which is a sort of kind of the style of a film noir. It takes place in Tel Aviv, in a suburb north of Tel Aviv, but it really could take place anywhere. But she was saying what drew her to doing this piece in Israel was that in Hollywood, where she's also worked, there's so many fingers in the pot. There's so many people rewriting the script, and everyone has to have their say, and everyone has to sort of be part of the process. But in Israel, the director or the writer has more creative control as well. But because the budgets are so low, it's very much blood, sweat, and tears, and a lot of creativity, and a lot of back to Shtisel, for example. They would shoot all of their scenes inside in the studio, and then a few months later they would shoot the scenes outside. So when I interviewed Michael Aloni, who plays the title role of Shtisel, Akiva Shtisel, he described having to go out, and he'd go in a scene, he'd be walking out with a blanket, to the balcony, and it'd be winter in Jerusalem. But when they'd film it, it was actually summer in Jerusalem, and he'd have to sort of remember what he was doing with his blanket in the cold and grasping his cup of tea as he goes out, because, in an American setting, you'd have a big studio and you have a big set and you'd be able to do it all in one. But here it's, it's very piecemeal, and it's very, very much on a shoestring.
But just sticking with you for a moment, Dina, you mentioned Michael Aloni. Tell us how the stars of these shows, like The Beauty Queen of Jerusalem or Shtisel, are treated in Israel and treated around the world, because these programs are watched in so many countries. What have you heard? And when they're recognized, are they mobbed? Can they lead relatively normal lives? Because they become, it's a small country. We're talking about 9.5 million people, and
Right.
the product, the television product, is in dozens and dozens of countries. So what have you heard about how the lives of these stars have been changed by this exposure?
Yeah. So when I interviewed Michael Aloni for the story, he told me the story of being in Buenos Aires in Argentina for something, and all of a sudden someone yelled out, "Kive!" And he turned around and he was like, "How do you know me?" So that was sort of an introduction to him about how widespread the show had become. But when he walks around Tel Aviv, he has a dog. My friend lives in his neighborhood. They chat. He talks about his latest shows to her. He's working on various new projects right now. But he's very low key, very approachable. I mean, it's Israel. People, it's not, people are interested by celebrities, but I think because everyone's so much more accessible in general, I haven't heard at least of people being mobbed, or whatnot, or having to, run out of a hotel or out of a restaurant because the paparazzi are there. I think people are a bit more chill and don't want to sort of act so provincial that they would jump overboard to see a celebrity. But what's interesting about notoriety, and this is sort of bringing back in some ways to the Jewish world, Shtisel was like the sleeper hit. I mean, they weren't even gonna. It was a struggle to even get it on Israeli television, because who wants to see a show about ultra Orthodox? There's so much tension between secular and religious in this country, a sort of dismissal of the other as sort of hostile and strange and foreign. But it became this sort of sleeper hit on Israeli TV, and then when the executives from Yes Studio, who the producers, they brought it to one of the senior executives at Netflix, who took it on almost as wow, he happened to be Jewish himself. He was interested. He was like, sure, we'll put it on. But they did absolutely zero promotion, zero. They're like, let it kind of fine. We'll park it there. We're not going to do anything to really promote it. But who promoted it? Apparently it was Jewish women. Jewish women in the UK and the US who started Facebook groups and started chatting about it among themselves. And, it was sort of a word, as I say in Hebrew, chavel mavi chavel, a friend brings a friend. It was word of mouth. And that sort of created this whole stir and whatnot. But but just one last point about the budgets. I mean, when I talk to the producers and the writers, what they told me over and over again is that in some ways, the constraints of the budget make you more creative. And that's actually helpful. If you have all the budgets in the world, you can create, a water world that everyone, mocks and no one wants to see. But when you have constraints and you have to work around them, you do more creative, and you have to, again, make the script has to be solid. There can be no room for, dead time.
Well, it is Startup Nation. So that same spirit of innovation has, I'm sure, swept over the TV industry. Just one other question. You talk about how these programs have been made without big international stars. This is now beginning to change. Now that international stars like Glenn Close have begun joining the cast of a show like Tehran, what impact will that have on the viewership of these Israeli television series? And is this the natural progression of shows with growing fan bases, and how will it also affect budgets? Because if you're moving to the next level, and you're going to bring in a Glenn Close or whoever it is, and I'm sure there will be somebody following her for another series, because I'm sure from the interests of the stars and their agents, this is a tremendous opportunity to be out there before the global public. So is this now going to change the face of Israeli television?
Yeah, and I think Israeli TV is at a juncture right now because there is, now that they've had the success, and now the people who are creating it want to have a bigger slice of that success. They don't want to have, as one producer named Esti Namdar told me, she's the producer of, you mentioned, A Beauty Queen of Jerusalem, which is a big, lavish period piece that I write about in the magazine story. She says she's worried about colonial, what she calls it, content colonialism. She says, she told me that she's worried that this enthusiasm over Israeli content has taken the form of content colonialism, that they don't have, Israel doesn't have natural resources like diamonds or gold. It has art, right? And people are coming here and kind of getting cheap shows and then, showing them on Netflix and different places and making big money from them. And now the creators are telling me, like SD, we need the big players to come and start investing here on the ground. And that's what's beginning to happen. You have already a few different Hollywood companies, from what I understand, who are investing in local production companies and putting bigger budgets into things. And as you mentioned, Tehran is a perfect example of that. Tehran is had 2 seasons now, very successful, and the new one, Glenn Close, will be part of it. If you don't know what Tehran is, it's a film about a female Mossad agent who goes undercover to Tehran, and mayhem ensues. That had a lot of, because they got an infusion of cash even in the second season, they were able, the director told me, to go and use like recording studios in Canada, for example, for the final editing. They were able to sort of bring it to the next level because they had this new amount of money being infused into the production. So it's definitely at a turning point, and we'll see if more money keeps coming in or not. But that's the hope, is that right now it's been sort of fairly cheap content for big profits, but not big profits for the producers. I was shocked to hear that some of the writers who sell their content to Americans like CBS, to different American networks as well, not just the streaming services, will get as little as like $10,000 for a script concept. I'm not talking about shows that are created in their original form in Hebrew, but concepts that are then sold to American audiences. They get very little money for that so far. So that's another place where hopefully the currency will go up for the Israeli creators as well.
Well, Gene, you may have to consider a follow-up article at some point about the next phase, the next stage in Israeli television. B'nai B'rith magazine also features an article by Eugene about an artist, Eric Finzi, who's paying tribute to the unique World War II rescue mission involving his family. Talk to us about how you decided to write about how Finzi is paying tribute to that mission that saved his father and his grandmother, and how you decided to tell this particular story.
Eric Finzi was my dermatologist. And I've been going to him for years. I thought, Finzi, well, that's an Italian name. And we were chatting one day and he starts telling me the story of his family. And I'm like, this is a story. This is, I've got to do this. And I generally only write the author's, the editor's note in the magazine. But, I've written, I think this is the third article I've written in, 12 years. And this is a great article for us. And, would you be all right? Can we do this story? And he said, yeah, I'd love to do it. And he was all in. There's so much to the story. It's so rich. I mean, he's not just a doctor. He's also an artist. And he's taken inspiration from the flight of his grandmother and his father from Italy during World War II. They boarded a ship in Naples that took 983 Italian Jews to the United States. It was a troop transport. There were an equal number of wounded GIs, and it all happened. It was really the only rescue mission undertaken by the United States during the war to save European Jews. And it was largely due to Ruth Gruber, who was an extraordinary woman. She was a photojournalist. She had, been to Alaska. She would later go on the Exodus, the ship that attempted to take Jews from post-war Europe to and Palestine, and she was then working for the Interior Department, and she was instrumental in convincing the government, despite objections from anti-Semites in the State Department, to attempt this rescue mission. And Eric Finzi's grandmother and father were on that ship, and when they got to the United States, they were interned at a former Army camp on Lake Ontario. And they were there for the duration. They were supposed to be sent back. But again, Ruth Gruber, who lived to be 105, convinced the government to allow them to stay. And Eric Finzi's grandmother and father moved to New York City. Eric Finzi's Alphonse, his father Alphonse married, and Eric Finzi was born, and his sister. And years later, he met Ruth Gruber. They had a reunion at this Lake Ontario former post in Oswego. And, he thanked it. If it were not for her, he would not exist. And I thought, what a remarkable story. And I would love to tell it. And the fact that he had used this experience as inspiration in his art gave it an extra layer of import. And so it was really a pleasure and an honor to be able to write the story and use some of his artwork to illustrate it. And that's how it came about.
Well, Ruth Rubin was just an iconic figure, and not only as a journalist, but she had such an impact on a very important period of history, world history and Jewish history, that it's great that you could bring this story and her part in it. And there's some great photographs in the story, and it's great that we have it in this issue. Not to sound biased, but there is so much great storytelling in the winter 2021 B'nai B'rith magazine that we haven't even gotten into, at least not in detail, from what Jewish languages can say about us to small town synagogues. I'm from New Hampshire. We went to a small town synagogue. But that article was of great interest to me, and much more. Is there another part of this issue, Gene, that really stands out? I mean, all of the articles do. You wouldn't have selected them if they wouldn't stand out. But is there anything special that we haven't talked about that you might want to lay out for us?
Well, I'm thrilled that we had such talented and distinguished writers, including Dina and Beryl Benderly did the article about Jewish languages. And Ken Ackerman, who's published many books, wrote about Kreplach, and also Cheryl Kempler, our amazing archivist, whose knowledge is so broad and deep, it just amazes me all the time. Did an article, and and Dan, frankly, your column about the 80th anniversary of the Wannsee Conference, which the Nazis put into effect the final solution. Was just very important to remind people that this happened and how it happened, and so many stories to be told and retold from the World War II experience. We live with the legacy every day. They just they affect us in so many ways. So that was really of vital importance as well. So yeah, it's if I can say, it's just a great issue, and I'm very proud of the staff and everybody who contributed to it. And I hope that folks read it and enjoy it as much as we did in producing it.
Well, I'm sure they will. Really, there's so much in there. You packed in a lot, and it's great reading for as we enter the winter season. Really a great issue, and congratulate you, Eugene, and the staff, and Dina for such a timely article about programs that we all watch. So I urge everybody to take a look at the new issue of the magazine. Check out the winter 2021 issue of B'nai B'rith magazine on our website, b'naibrith.org. It's out now with articles by both Dina Kraft and Eugene Meyer and so much more. Gene, Dina, thank you again for joining me and for all the hard work that you do and have done in making this issue a resounding success. It's been great speaking with both of you.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Well, thanks again to B'nai B'rith magazine editor Eugene Meyer and feature writer Dina Kraft for being with us and giving us a behind-the-scenes look at our winter 2021 issue. And of course, to all of our viewers, thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure you never miss a program by subscribing to the B'nai B'rith YouTube channel, liking us on Facebook, and following us on Twitter and Instagram. And be sure to visit our website, b'naibrith.org, to learn more about our important work. For my guests and for B'nai B'rith, I'm Dan Mariaschin. See you again soon.